Welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the monthly live mineral webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, the SMMP, and Blue Cap Productions. Tune in on the first Wednesday of every month and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live.
Happy November, everyone, and welcome to episode 92 of Mineral Talks Live, your favorite online mineral talk show. I'm your host, Brian Swoboda, together with my lovely and vivacious partners, Dr. Raquel Alonso Perez from the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, and Dr. Eloise Gaillou from the Society of Mineral Museum Professionals, also known as the SMMP. We are thrilled to welcome you to this month's show. If you missed any of our past programs, you can always catch the rebroadcasts on our Mineral Talks Live YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@Mineral Talks Live. And don't forget to click the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever we post a new episode. For those of you tuning in for the first time, Mineral Talks Live is a monthly mineral talk show that airs live on the first Wednesday of every month. Our goal has always been to connect you with other members of the mineral collecting community via our interviews with some of the best curatrix, curators, collectors, dealers, miners, researchers, artists, and media people in the mineral world. Through the miracle of technology, I'm coming to you live from Honolulu, Hawaii, and Raquel is usually broadcasting straight from Cambridge, Massachusetts, while Eloise is beaming in directly from her home in Paris, France. So this is truly an international show, and we're happy that you could join us today from wherever in the world you are right now. In fact, today's show is the first show we've done since the annual Munich show, which is one of the few times a year the three of us can actually physically get together. And after 4 years of working together as equal partners in this unique program, it's something when we can still have this much fun together, even when the cameras aren't rolling. Now, one of the things that makes this program unique is not only is this a live show, but it's a show where you get to interact with our guests. All you have to do to participate is to type your comments in the chat or the Q&A features, both of which are located at the bottom of your Zoom window. The chat feature allows you to instantly send messages to everyone watching the live show, so we encourage you to be as active as you'd like in the chat during the show. And while our guests and I generally don't see your messages during our conversation, throughout the show, both Raquel and Eloise will be monitoring the chat area and will be very active there. Occasionally, they may even interject a question or comment to us during this interview, so don't be shy if you want to ask something. Also, when you log in, we ask you to send a message to everyone letting us know where you're tuning in from so we can see how far around the world we're actually reaching. Now, if you happen to have a question directly for our guest, or maybe it's a bit more detailed or needs a bit of a longer answer, go ahead and use the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the show. Now, finally, towards the end of the program, you'll see a window pop up on your screen. This is our quick fire 5 questions segment to see how well all of us know our guest. So test your knowledge, play along, and who knows, we may have a good icebreaker for you the next time you see our guest in person. And speaking of our guest for today's show, we're going to jet over to Raquel's neck of the woods and chat with a person whose name you've probably heard, but you may not have seen him a lot at the mineral shows. His name is mostly used in conjunction with Yale University's fantastic Peabody Museum, where his vision has come to stunning fruition in the mineral hole that bears his name. Ladies and gentlemen, the man who puts the live up in wasabi, my friend and yours, Mr. David Friend. David, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Nice to see you. And
thanks,
Eloise.
Thanks for joining our show. David, it looks like you're having a great day out there in Boston. I hear that you're about ready to do a little bit of exercise right after the show finishes.
Yeah, it's unseasonably warm here. It's like 75 today. So as soon as we get off the call today, I'm going to jump on my bike and head out to the suburbs and get a nice ride in while I can.
Fantastic. Sounds like a great day. Now, David, we always like to start our program by turning back the clock. So let me ask you,
how did you first get interested in minerals and mineral collecting?
Well, it was in grade school. So when I was a kid growing up in Westchester outside New York, they were building I-95 down through New Rochelle, fairly near my house. And at the time when I think I was in fourth grade at the time, I was really into electricity and was always building electromagnets and things that required wire. And so I used to crawl under the fence and cut through the construction site on my way home from school to pick up leftover blasting wire. And one day I was crawling around and I looked up at this cliff that they had just blasted that day, and I saw these things, something sparkling. And so I clambered up, and it was a little pocket of quartz crystals.
Wow.
And I thought I had discovered diamonds. So I got really excited and ran home. And my dad, who's a chemist, I told him about it. And he said, well, one of our neighbors here is a professor of mineralogy at NYU. Why don't you tell him about it? So he was an elderly gentleman, but he sort of took me under his wing, and we both on Saturday we both went over to the construction site, and he was pretty good natured and crawled under the fence just like I did. And I showed him these crystals, and he said, "Well, those are quartz crystals." And he went home and gave me a rock hammer, which I still have
No
to this
way.
day. Yeah, that's my 8-year-old David rock hammer. And we went in there and we chipped the quartz crystals out. And then the guard saw us and called the police. And Professor Magnus gave the cop a good talking to. He said, "We're scientists and we're here on, scientific discovery." So the cop let us go without any tickets or anything like that. But we were told not to come back to the construction site. I ignored that advice and went almost every day. But that's how I got that. That's how I got started. And so, this mineralogist started showing me I could find other things, garnets and feldspar, and I started a little collection. And in fact, I don't know if you can see here, but there's a 8-year-old David entering a science fair with a board with minerals classified by carbonates, sulfates, that sort of thing. And so I was already at it.
I have that up on my screen if Raquel or Eloise wants to spotlight it. There we go.
There you go. Yeah. So there I am at my house in New Rochelle as little David. And so I won this little local science fair with this display of minerals that I had found kind of in the Westchester area, which is not a great place for finding minerals, but it was interesting. Found lots of.
Wait, so all of these are self-collected on the board?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, usually I think at that age, I'd be used to seeing maybe 1, 2, or 3 pieces that are self-collected, and then you end up in a rock shop or going to some local mineral show. But you self-collected all of these.
Yeah, well, I don't do anything half-assed. So when I get started on something, it kind of takes over, which is why I flunked out of high school. But anyway.
Oh, that's a story in itself. Oh, you flunked out of high school. I love that.
My poor parents sent me away to boarding school and sort of shaped me up. But anyway, I did well. Graduated first in my class anyway, even without going to class.
So then, David, what was the first mineral show that you attended after doing so much field collecting?
I think it was years later. I started going to Tucson. One of my friends told me about the Tucson show, and I had sort of put off going. One year I went. It's probably 25 years ago, something like that. And I've been going ever since. And then I think there was also a local mineral club in Boston that I went to some couple of meetings of theirs. But I'm not much of a joiner, I have to tell you. So
yeah.
I I like to just I like going to Tucson, and we usually rent a big house, and my kids come, and my college roommate comes from California, and we have a kind of an ongoing party while we're there. Go out and look at minerals, go for long bike rides. One of my daughters is a semi-pro biker, and so she can kick my butt, out on the trails. So,
The challenge, the gauntlet is thrown.
mhm.
So, David, you started collecting these minerals. Did you have, or do you recall any kind of memory of your greater perspective of how these minerals fit into the natural world and or the importance of these minerals?
That first sensation that I had when I saw those quartz crystals on this, uh, recently blasted cliff when they were building 95, has sort of stayed with me, and it's just this sense of wonder. And even though I'm a science nerd um, at heart, what really got me was just it's amazing that there's something this beautiful could just exist in nature, and that you could find it and take it out and look at it. And as I got into collecting in a bigger way, um, I sort of collect more of that, more or less like Jack Halpern does.
You're
I
attracted
want
to
to
beauty.
I want to surround myself with natural wonders,
Yeah, yeah.
and that led me to collecting big specimens, which because when I come into my office here, and I guess we'll go around the office a little bit as we go through the talk today. Um, I want to come in and I just want to feel, excited and energized
Mm-hmm.
by the things that are around me. And so I don't collect small stuff generally unless it's an oddity, something
Yeah,
that I look at and I laugh because it's such a
it's so
some weird
weird.
little thing.
Okay, so you found that first little that vug filled with quartz, and your initial thought was, "Wow, I found diamonds," and so it's like this, "Ooh, I found treasure. I'm going to be rich" kind of idea. When did your perspective of minerals switch from kind of more of the the value of the monetary value of it towards more an appreciation of the beauty of nature?
Well, it didn't take very long. I mean, 8-year-olds are always interested in, fantasizing about striking it rich.
Sure, yeah.
But I was quickly disabused of that. And but that did not dampen my enthusiasm at all for these wonderful things that I had found that I took home, and I'd sit and look at them every day and play games with them and do whatever. And so I still feel that way about minerals, and I don't worry about minerals as an investment. I have millions of dollars worth of minerals here in my office, but I have no interest in selling them or monetizing them. That's not what I'm interested in. I love having these things that just are awe-inspiring when you come into the room.
So now, when you're buying new pieces to your collection, I know you're running out of room, but as we said earlier before the camera started rolling, you need to furnish the house in Spain. So keep buying. But as you're buying new pieces, are you finding that you hang on to the old pieces, or do they replace them because you find more beauty in one versus the other? How does your collecting philosophy flow?
Well, I have a beautiful daughter who lives about 4 blocks from me, and she has
This
a
is
nice big
Zoe we're talking
apartment.
about.
Zoe,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
who most people in Tucson would recognize because, well, she's just around the show a lot. But she makes space, shall we say, for new specimens.
So you come home after a long trip, you say, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize I had that big gap in my living room. I think I need to buy another mineral."
That's right. I said, where did that go? Well, Dad, you weren't using it.
That's super. David, let's talk about mentors. So you were talking, was it Professor Magnus, you said?
Hmm, I believe that was his name. Yeah.
Um, how long did he play a significant role in kind of, he introduced you and started teaching you about minerals? How long did he play that kind of advisory role? And at what point did you start acquiring other mentors, and what roles did they play in your life?
Not very long. I mean, he was quite elderly, and once we got thrown out of this construction site by the cops, he was a little reluctant to follow me into any other uh, illegal adventures, which was mostly where you found minerals. Um, but I just started reading, and
Mm.
started getting books, and I read everything I could get my hands on about chemistry. And by the time I was in fifth or sixth grade, I was building molecules with sort of erector set kind of things. And, I take my sodium atom and connect it to my chlorine atom, or take my iron atom and connect it to my oxygen atom. And so I was, and my father encouraged this because he was, a chemist. And he would bring home from his lab whatever I needed. If I wanted to blow something up, I'd give him a list of chemicals that they would they would show up the next day. So he was very indulgent, and despite the fact that I almost burned the house down several times, he never really got mad at me. So I have him to thank for that. But I got into the chemistry of minerals, and then once I went to boarding school up in New Hampshire as a teenager, there were lots of abandoned mines in New Hampshire. And
Uh-huh.
I started a mineral club at my boarding school, and we talked some teacher into being the faculty advisor. And we had an old Jeep, and every weekend we would head up into the mountains. And if you go on Mindat and just look at mines in New Hampshire, it's dotted with them, and especially things like lead mines, because during the Revolutionary War period, um, the British put an embargo on importation of lead because they didn't want the colonists to be able to make bullets.
Right.
And so, there were discoveries of galena and other minerals, other lead minerals in New Hampshire, which became very important as a resource for the colonists in Massachusetts. And all those bullets that were fired on the Green and Concord, Massachusetts, were made of lead that came from mines in New Hampshire. So, we started finding all kinds of things, and in fact, we found a number of very large beryl crystals that are still sitting in the lobby of my old boarding school.
Mm.
Those typical big, opaque bluish
Sure. Yeah.
green beryl crystals that you find in New England.
Fantastic. So now you're talking about building molecules of mineral specimens using an erector set. So it kind of, the way it's tracking in my mind right now is it started off about finding treasure, which then transitioned into a appreciation of the beauty, and then a much more kind of scientific approach, maybe trying to understand how it was created or why it was created. And it seems like, there's like a money, art, scientific a flow to your story in mineral collecting here. So, how much do the oddities appeal to you just because they are quite unusual from the standard growth of any specific mineral species?
Well, I like things that are kind of odd and funny. And, I can't remember who it was. The one collector that I knew collected anything that had two balls.
Sounds like Carolyn Manchester.
That's who it was. It was Carolyn
Okay.
Manchester, exactly. And so there's a certain uh, a certain amount of just capriciousness that happens in nature, and I find those things amusing. I mean, they make me laugh when I look at them, and you say, how the heck could this happen? And what about the guy who found it? Did he realize how silly the thing is?
Right.
And so so I have a handful of those in my collection, and usually those kind of things are not giant sized, but I have a handful of those, which we will see as we go around.
Well, so far, your collecting style seems to be it's about beauty, but there's also a whimsical side to that. How well does that track with just your own personality?
Well, I'm a jokester, and
Yeah.
I like playing pranks. And in fact, since I met Raquel years ago, I've taught myself Spanish. And over the last 5 years or so, I've been writing stories about how I got myself into a lot of trouble as a kid. So there just were, I think I'm up to 25 chapters now of
Oh my
times
God.
where I had some kind of joke or something that I was doing on somebody or other, and it ended up getting in trouble. So,
well, we want a copy of that book when it comes out.
They say. Yes, blackmail. You can have it after I die.
Oh gosh. That'll be forever from now.
It'll be a while, I hope. Yeah.
Totally. Excuse me, I had a cough there. Now, I think most people, as I said in the intro, they know your name from Yale University Peabody Museum. And the Peabody Museum's always been a very influential museum. And, recently departed mineral legend Bob Jones, whom we all very much miss. He used to always tell stories about how his mineral collecting days started as a result of visiting the Peabody when he was a child. Now, you recently did some pretty amazing things at the Peabody when you created the David Friend Hall of Gems and Minerals. And for the two viewers in our audience that don't know what that is, why don't you go ahead and describe the project that you did at the Peabody and what influenced you to do that? While you're doing that, I'm going to play a video that is basically a walkthrough that I filmed when I was at the grand reopening of the Peabody. I guess it was just last month or the month before.
Right.
And we're not going to kind of describe what we see. It's just going to be kind of eye candy as you and I talk about the Peabody a little bit. So let me switch to that and you can start. This is the entrance to the David Friend Hall. You can see, at the very top there, right above the quartz, is the name of the hall. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this. And David, tell us how this started, your involvement with the Peabody.
So, I think the role of natural history museums has changed over the years. When Yale opened this museum in the 1890s, this was the era of the real Indiana Joneses, and people would go off to Africa and China and come back with trainloads of fossils and minerals and things of this sort. And these became a resource for the faculty and for scientists. Nowadays, most of the scientific work gets done down in the basement. So we have probably 300 or 400 specimens on display here, no more. Sort of less is more kind of philosophy. Yeah, exactly. But there's 175,000, I think, something like that down in the basement. And that's where the serious scientific work gets done. So I wanted my view is that natural history museums now with dinosaurs and everything else really serve the public. And I wanted a mineral hall where the kids would come in And so far, there have been about 200,000 kids come to the Peabody just since January, where the kids would come in and the mineral room would evoke that same sense of awe that they get when they walk into the dinosaur hall and confront that 80-foot brontosaurus.
Sure.
And so, I wanted, particular attention to the lighting. I wanted minimal signage. I wanted a dark, dramatic kind of atmosphere. And, and nobody really had that. So that was the idea behind it. And through the generosity of some of my collector friends, Gail and Jim Spann, Mark Pospisil, and others, we collected not only the big permanent specimens that I've donated to the museum, like that 1,800-pound Namibian quartz that you saw at the entrance there, but also have things that would stay for 3 or 4 years and then get swapped out, and other collectors would have a chance to put their best specimens on display. So most of the things that you're showing here are from Barry Ample's collection, and his son David.
And David, excuse me, I want to make sure that the audience understands how significant that is. Barry Ample was famous for having an incredible collection, but any piece that went into the collection would virtually disappear. And this is kind of the first time. Hole. Well, thank you for saying that. But yeah, he was the black hole. And these large specimens that we're looking at here are the ones that you're talking about that you donated, and you're calling those anchor pieces.
That's right. They don't move, and partly they don't move because they're extremely heavy. But those stay permanently in there, and those are the mineral equivalents of the 80-foot brontosaurus. And so that's what really draws you in when you walk in the door. And, with this new Amuse technology app that we're developing that, we haven't talked about yet, we can actually tell where people are stopping and looking and what they're looking at, how much time they spend looking at this or that. Yeah, those.
Well, David, just describe that Amuse app for our viewers so that they kind of understand what the purpose of it is, and then we can come back to the technology behind it.
Well, everybody's walking around with a cell phone these days, and I don't like labels. I don't like, cluttering up a display with a lot of verbiage. I think people would rather be inspired to learn rather than be taught. And so, after I finished the Mineral Hall, I launched a company. I hired a guy who had been formerly a grad student at Yale to be CEO, and we raised money, and we've spent the last 3 years developing this app called Amuse, which will be launched at the Peabody this year. And it's more like TikTok style videos. So you walk up to a piece, the app knows where you're standing in the museum, so it knows what you're looking at. And the little TikTok style videos most of them are being made by students and experts. And, they're designed to give people the answers that naturally come, like, how did this get made? Where did it come from? Who dug it up? How old is it? How much is it worth? Those kinds of things. They were looking at, that's the biggest specimen. It's 3,800 pounds.
And that's at the exact opposite end of the hall when you first come in. And so these anchor pieces kind of draw you because they're stunning visually and they're large. And as you come towards the anchor pieces, off in the periphery, you see these other splashes of color and light that draw you in different directions. And I think with the Amuse app, it's going to be fascinating to be able to watch traffic patterns evolve as people move their way through the David Friend Hall.
Yeah, and when people go home from, school kids go home, they can then show their parents what they liked, and
Now this is the holy grail of minerals. That is the great phosphophylite, formerly from the Dave Wilbur collection. First time on display in ages.
Mm-hmm. And of course, out in the outside the entrance to the hall is the famous red rocket
Oh, we're coming up to that.
tourmaline. Are
Yeah.
you? Oh,
Yeah.
good. I hope you get a picture of that, because
That's included.
that had not been seen in a long time. And I was there when we opened the crate, and it was a pretty exciting time. Yeah, there's a piece that we got from China. It's aragonite. And amazingly enough, it made it all the way from China without any damage.
That was one thing that Alan Hart and I, we were standing in front of that. We just couldn't understand how that could make it from China without damage. And I think it was Graham Sutton who had packaged it and sent it over. And sure enough, it made it.
Yeah, he was there. And yeah, so we got Barry's, phenomenal gold collection, which some of those pieces had been on display at the Museum of Natural History in New York. And
now, I was actually more impressed by the gold exhibit that was on the ground floor as you first come in off to the right. That, to me, was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's the California gold, which really is phenomenal.
And that...
So there was...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you just saw a giant stibnite that was donated by Rob Levinsky. And then we have gem.
Yeah, all those pieces after the stibnite were all from the Yale collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want some nice, probably $20 million worth of gems in that case. And then there's the some more Aklas.
And I love this rough and cut. And this is before you get into the hall, but this is arguably the thing to come and see. Well, this and the phosphophylite. Between the two of them, that's probably where I spent most of my time.
It was pretty exciting to open the crate and see this for the first time in I don't know how many years. But it's one of those things that legendary kind of piece that disappeared into Barry's black hole.
And a shout out to Cap Beasley, who couldn't make it there for the grand opening, who was primarily responsible for all the gems and jewelry there.
Yeah, Cap and Benjamin Zucker, who is a well-known diamond merchant in New York, who is also a Yale.
David, if you would talk about, you mentioned very briefly when we went into the annex there about the lighting, because you go in there and it's very dimly lit, almost to the point where you can't see where you're walking. And there are benches there right in front of the big fossil of the palm leaf. And talk about the strategy behind that dark lighting of the overall gallery.
Well, you spotlight the pieces. And, I don't like floodlight kind of situations because it's distracting. You want the light focused on the pieces, and each piece has to be tuned. And so when we built the museum, we used very, very expensive lights where you can adjust the color temperature. Mm-hmm. And we tune each piece. We tune the lighting for each piece, and sometimes there's just one spot, sometimes there's multiple spots, sometimes there's tiny little lights coming up behind a piece if it's transparent and you want to shine light through it, and so forth. And being an electrical engineer, I love this stuff. And but I had this definitely in mind. I had some people disparage it as a sort of a jewelry store approach, but that is actually the effect that I wanted to create. I wanted people to come in and just look at every one of these pieces as if it were a signature piece at Tiffany's or something like that, where you'd go into a very dramatically darkened room and the piece itself is just glowing. And and that's the effect that we were able to create. And thanks partly to sort of my vision, but also Laura Friedman, the exhibit designer's brilliance. And she took every one of my ideas and took it up an order of magnitude.
Sure. Now, one thing I noticed is that people would come in and they'd end up sitting on those benches after spending a little time, and they would enter into sort of a very contemplative, almost Zen-like mode. And I think the lighting had a lot to do with that because it wasn't overwhelming. It didn't continually force them into motion. They could sit back and they can just kind of absorb the beauty around them. And it feels like that's somewhat echoed in what you created for yourself right there in your home office.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's actually better than what I've got in my home office. But
yeah,
I have been always experimenting with lighting at home, and we'll see that. Unfortunately, it's daylight out, so we get a lot of background light from the windows, these big high windows here in these old houses. But for the Yale Museum, we wanted it dark, and the first thing we did was created a black. Actually, it's a very dark purple room with no external light coming in.
Okay.
And then wood to give it a warmth. So without the minerals in it, the ambience is this very dark purple paint with very little ambient light and wood and a dark carpet. And then bring in the minerals, spotlight them, tune the lighting to get the best color rendering from each mineral. And, that's the way we created these effects. And
that's really interesting, David. Yeah. Go on.
Very little signage, absolutely minimal signage. And if you want to learn more about these minerals, you're going to use the Amuse app.
Yeah, I think the only signage I remember seeing is when you were acknowledging from where the collection came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking back on it. And, it's interesting because when I was there in September, I think it was, when I was there this past September, I think I was there about 5 days. And prior to that, I was there for the grand opening in 2016. And I never realized that the room was painted a deep purple. I always assumed it's black, but it makes sense that deep purple with the wood accents to create that warmth. So next time I come, I'm gonna really take a strong look at the walls.
Yeah, we put a lot of thought into that, into choosing the colors and giving it warmth with the wood, because that was an important component of it. And the other thing is to resist putting too much stuff on display.
Yes.
And when I went down to see the renovated mineral hall at the Museum of Natural History in New York, they just I think they have 100% too much stuff on display. It's difficult to resist when you've got a huge collection of so many great pieces. It's difficult to resist putting them all out there, especially if you're a scientist and you know that each one of these has scientific interest. But
exactly.
What you end up with is a big wall that's floodlit,
mm-hmm.
and it's a totally different aesthetic experience.
Totally. And I think, depending on what the curator, the designer is trying to go for there, you can make an argument one way or the other. If you really want to focus on the science, then yeah, you need to put a lot more on display. But if you're approaching it along the lines of what you've done, which is kind of you want almost a more visceral, emotional response to these incredible pieces, then less is more with the warmth and the kind of the direct contrast with the isolation, treating each piece almost as if it were a piece of art that you'd see in the Louvre.
It's a recognition that the audience is the general public nowadays. It's not scientists, mineralogists, or whatever. Right. They're down in the basement or out in the laboratory building behind the museum. And we when these busloads of kids are unloaded in front of the museum and they come walking into that gallery, what you want to do is try to turn them into little scientists or little engineers. And the way you do that is to get them excited. And so it's inspiration as opposed to this this instinct to teach that every academic has. Oh, I want to teach them everything about this thing. So I'm going to write a lot of words. I'm going to put a lot of words behind it. And I'm going to put 8 different specimens that are all similar, but not quite the same from different localities or something like that. It's a harder sell. You might be able to do that for college kids, but for, a busload of 8th graders or 7th graders walking in the door, you want them to go home and say, wow, that was amazing. I want to learn more about minerals.
There you go.
What I saw was so amazing. I might be able to find some of those things in my own backyard.
Absolutely. And I'll share with you an observation that I'm just kind of recognizing now as you're talking. When I was at the Peabody in September, I was posting some videos that I was shooting while I was there. I was there and I was lucky enough to be there when they were changing the signs out of the rocket, the big tourmaline that was on display. So they actually opened up the door for the rocket. So I was able to get my arm in there and kind of film it inside the case, which was fabulous. I always like to shoot things without a pane of glass separating me from the specimen. And when I posted that, I remember reading a comment on the video. Someone was complaining about the noise coming from the children in the hallway there. And I recognize that. But, for me, it's like, hey, if I don't care as long as the kids are here. But here's the interesting thing. While it was noisy outside in that area where the rocket is, when you went into the David Friend Hall, the noise went down. And I believe, and it'd be interesting because the thing that you're doing with this Amuse app is you're sort of creating a platform where you can test different hypotheses so that you can see how you might be able to modify a museum exhibit to be more effective for the audience coming in. Possibly what is going on is you have the kids, when they come up to the 3rd floor, if they're taking the stairs, the doors open up and there's the rocket right in front of them. And so they're noisy and they're boisterous. And then they go by the gems and then they enter the David Friend Hall. And when you're entering in there, there's a shift, there's a difference, there's a palatable difference once you enter in there and you have that very dim lighting in the spotlight. And I believe that's enough to quiet the ambient noise coming from the students. And it allows them to focus more on what they're seeing and possibly explore how what they're seeing is affecting what's going on inside of them emotionally. And it'd be neat if you can provide any kind of insight on that using your app.
Yeah, well, we certainly can, because the app will track where everybody is. But, furthermore, we did put acoustic treatment in that room as well. And you can definitely feel it when you walk into that room. It's a little bit like walking into a church or something. Everybody just quiets down, and it has a very different ambience than people running around in the dinosaur hall.
Totally. Yeah. It'd be like walking out on Fenway Park without a game going on. It's like, okay, you're in Holy Land right now. There's exactly. A hush. Yeah.
That's right.
So, David, talk to me real
Fenway
briefly.
Park doesn't have that effect on me, but I know what you're talking about.
It doesn't have that effect on you, really?
No, it kind of does. I have to say, it's an historical baseball park, and
you go in there, you got the big Citgo sign. It's like, I'm in the church.
You'll see Wasabi logos all over Fenway Park too. So obviously I've succumbed to its magic.
I got you. David, I want to do one last talk about the Peabody, and then we're going to switch and we're going to start taking a look at your personal collection. And I know we're going to go over time because that's the way I roll. But talk to the viewers about how what you did with the David Friend Hall basically kind of created a template for the renovation of the Peabody Museum.
So after we, renovated or built this whole new mineral hall, attendance at the museum went up considerably. It got a fair amount of press in the New England area, and attendance at the museum went up about 30%. And one of my other museum board members, a guy named Ed Bass from Fort Worth, Texas, from the famous Bass family. Ed said, wow, now that we've got this mineral hall, the rest of the museum looks shabby. And so he decided to donate something like $150 million to renovate the entire museum in the sort of style that we created in the David Friend Hall. And the museum was closed for the last 3.5 years. While the museum was being we took it right back to the studs and the bricks, literally. The only thing that didn't change was the David Friend Hall. But with Ed's grant and then some other donations that followed along, we were able to reclaim about 50% more space for exhibits in the museum, because over the years, public interest in the museum had started to wane. And as I said, the scientists were all busy down in the basement. And so nobody was really supporting it. And, once we saw what could happen if we, did something that the public would come in and go, wow, Ed said, we should just make the whole museum over in this style. And so the museum was closed all this time, and now it's back open. And in the first 5 or 6 months since it's been opened, there's been more visitors than there have been in the largest complete year prior to the renovation. So
wow,
it's attendance has more than doubled. My guess it's going to be somewhere between 200 and 300% up from prior renovation, and it is now the biggest attraction in between Boston and New York. It's the biggest attraction in Connecticut and central New England.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. That is superb. And I love
very lucky, that I had this, not a classmate, it's a couple of years ahead of me, but somebody who had the wherewithal to really renovate the entire museum.
Well, to me, that's exciting because obviously we love museums here on the show. And what you're doing is you're experimenting to see how museums might play a different role or how their role can shift for the modern day audience to drive attendance up. And it seems like you've got your finger on a very, very strong and serious pulse right here.
I think so. And it's kind of the future of natural history museums, because their original role has become somewhat obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, final comment on this. You had mentioned it's the Barry Yample collection that's on exhibit. It's on exhibit, my understanding is for the next 5 years.
Right.
And then after that, you may shift to a different collector. You may shift to different parts of his collection. I'm not sure. So if you as the viewer, if you haven't had a chance to visit the Peabody, you've got 5 years. If there's no chance that you have of making it to the Peabody, keep your eyes peeled to Blue Cap Productions. We were there with Alan Hart and Stefan Niculescu, who is the collections manager at the Peabody. And we filmed, I believe, 52 different segments where Alan and Stefan are in front of each different case, and they're talking about the different specimens in there. So we're looking forward to releasing that and making that available for the general public. So now, David, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that let's take a look at where you are right now. You're sitting in your home office in Boston, Massachusetts, and you are surrounded, and we see some in the background. And I saw some comments on the chat asking, what's that specimen behind David's shoulder? We're going to go through and take a look at everything right now. So, David, you've got your phone there. I'm going to ask you to pick that up, and you can start giving us a narrated tour through your collection while we also launch the
turn it this way.
So let's go ahead and Raquel or Eloise, let's launch the poll. David, if you see a window pop up, just minimize it. You're not supposed to read the questions. That comes a little bit later.
All right.
Go.
Let me get my phone here. Here we go. So
there we go.
Hopefully you can see me. So I'm just going to start to the right of my desk. And, I think those of you who know me know that I'm.
Oh, David, your camera went vertical again for some reason.
Well, okay.
There we go.
How about that? Good.
Perfect.
So, I'm still CEO of a tech company, and I spend most of my day on Zoom calls. And so being able to just look around when I'm working is great. So this is a bit of an oddball. This is a fluorite wall, and you can see the
I love that
quartz crystal sticking up inside of it. It's a very cool piece. I got this from
It penetrates into the sphere.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a very interesting piece, and and here we have the inside of a geode from Uruguay. And I like this because it almost looks like a Swiss village or something like that with snow on top of the houses. And you can see there's all kinds of things in here from, calcites and amethyst and fluorite, feldspars. It's quite an interesting piece. I bought this from a German collector who had it in his own collection for 25 years or so. And,
I love that because so many of those pieces, they focus on the amethyst geode with the calcite inclusion inside of it, but that's been all trimmed away to just focus on the inclusion. And it's very structural. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. He cried when he had to part with it. But I told him he could come visit at any time.
And David, you're not supposed to laugh when people are crying.
No, I know. But I feel the same way about it now, actually. So I'm never going to sell it. Yeah. So this is a very large gypsum geode inside, again, from a geode. This is probably a 250-pound piece. And you can see the clarity of these crystals. They're just water clear. And I have this on
not even a Wilbur on them.
Yeah. And you can see the anhydrite, which is the same mineral without the water in the crystal structure. And I have it on kind of a lazy Susan because looking at it from all different angles is kind of fun. It, looks like what does Superman have?
Superman, his Fortress of Solitude. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful piece, and people who come to my house love this piece just because of its size and the clarity of the crystals. And
well, now, David, let's stay on that for a second, because a lot of people love collecting thumbnails because they're, the story is that there's no way to get a more perfect a crystal than a thumbnail, because the larger it gets, the higher chance of any kind of damage. This is an extremely large piece, and it looks so incredibly pristine. How long did it take you to track this piece down? When did you first become aware of it, and how long until you were able to acquire it?
I found this maybe 20 years ago. And this came from Richard Berger's collection, and he had a whole bunch of, he was a dealer for many, many years and had put aside a number of things for his own private collection. He was intending to build a mineral museum in Seattle. And, luckily he was willing to be talked out of some of these pieces over years. So you'll see probably half a dozen pieces from Richard Berger's collection here. And he has sort of the same tastes I have. He
Okay.
wants people to be like, holy crap, when they see something like this. That's the
Sure.
reaction they want to get. And he wants that to come from people who don't know anything about minerals.
Right.
Not just the people who would come to Tucson or Munich.
And I love
So,
that you have it on a rotating base.
yeah, it's, I couldn't decide which way to face it. And so the solution was build a custom base that's sort of a lazy Susan.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're going to create a whole new class of mineral collecting called the holy cow or holy crap mineral category.
Yeah. Here's a few that are normal I don't have too many cabinet sized pieces, but a very nice dioptase from the Congo.
That's a nice big dioptase.
Yeah, a beautiful Milpilus azurite that I got from Rob Levinsky some years ago in Munich, actually. And Amazonite and quartz. I like the idea of radiation turning those quartz dark.
And that's from the Smoky Hawk.
Yep.
Yeah. The Doris family.
And over here, this is one of the earlier my mind just went blank.
Vivianite.
Yeah, Vivianite. Thank you. Jeez. That came out of Bolivia. And this one is, nicely transparent. Some of them are almost black. And, I put a couple of LEDs behind them so that you can actually see the color. And, I just love these fluorites. If I were going to start collecting all over again, I might just collect fluorite.
Wow.
But this one is, typical Illinois bicolored with the yellow on the inside and then the secondary clear fluorite on the outside and a nice tourmaline from Afghanistan. And then here we have another major piece. So this one is 190 pounds, and this is from the Elmwood mine, and I had to compete with the Smithsonian to acquire this piece, but it's important. It's important because the calcite crystal, a beautiful golden calcite crystal, is 20 inches long, and everything is in here. You've got the purple fluorite, which is typical of the Elmwood mine. You've got a bright yellow calcite, which is not typical of the Elmwood mine. And you've got the barite down here, and you can see poking out some of the sphalerite, which was the mineral that they were actually mining here. So this is everybody I know from the mineral world who has seen this considers it a major piece. And it certainly is jaw-droppingly beautiful with all the different colors. I'm not sure how well it shows up in the camera, but
it has all the classic thumbprints from Elmwood. It's fantastic, and it's huge.
Yeah, it's really big, and because of its weight, the sphalerite is pretty heavy. It's not going anywhere. And then right next to it is a wonderful geode that Cat Beasley found in China. And, it's on one of these crazy Chinese bases that they make out of tree stumps.
Now, I made a lot of points when I was in Nanjing earlier this year about the Chinese, and I'm putting that in quote, way of collecting, which is to have larger specimens on carved bases. That's not really European or American style. It is if it fits the specimen, why not? If it's all about beauty and if the stand can actually enhance or add something to the display of the specimen, then go ahead and do it. I think it's fabulous. I think that looks
Yeah.
so much better than if it were just on a lucite base, as we tend to do it.
Well, yeah, and you can kind of lose yourself in this piece, you know. I mean, it's got caves and it's got stalactites and stalagmites and columns and you know, places where you can kind of crawl in. And so it is almost like kind of a natural cave. And to put it on this crazy base with all of these symbols of nature, it just seemed to fit. And, you know, when I first got it, my first instinct was, whoa, this is crazy. I'm going to get a lucite base.
Right.
But then I started to look at it and I started to realize what the aesthetic was of the person that sold this to me, and how you know, they were looking at this as a symbol of nature. So it's
100%. And in the carved base, you actually can see some staircases, which suggests that, you know, this is going up into the mountains, or perhaps evocative of the clouds, and this is a heavenly scene, but that it is accessible. And when you look at the actual geode, it does look like you're entering into a huge azurite malachite cave. And so I think it ties in beautifully with that base. And I'm not saying that all wooden bases are superior. Sometimes they just don't work with the specimen. And I think it actually detracts. That particular one works beautifully together. I love that. There's a lot of harmony in it.
I do too. And then right behind it, I was lucky to find this really great sulfur specimen from Sicily.
Now, this blew me away because this is a Sicilian sulfur.
Yeah, Raquel and I saw this in a collection in Miami where we went, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, maybe more. And the you know, the owner didn't want to part with it at the time, but he unfortunately died a year or so ago. And so I was able to get this. I've been constantly pursuing this piece for a long, long time. And it just has that gorgeous, you know, bright yellow that you get with this, you know, the albite, the white albite. It's just a beautiful piece. And I love sulfur. But when I saw this piece, I said, that is the sulfur that I want. And, you know, opportunity.
That is a sulfur beyond all other sulfurs I've ever seen.
It really is beautiful. Yeah. I think, Raquel, you probably will remember seeing that in Miami. And then, you know, there are these, you saw the giant sandstone concretion at Yale.
At the Peabody.
Right. So, you know, my friend Richard Berger went over to France when they first found these and bought the whole find and brought them all back to a secret warehouse in Seattle where they sat for many, many years. And I was able to get in with him and kind of picked what I thought were the most unusual pieces. And so I'm very lucky to have these because there aren't a lot around. And the ones that I've seen, like they're starting to show up in Tucson, but they're a second quality, I think.
Tertiary.
Yeah. There's a beautiful one in Paris, I know. And there's one at the Smithsonian. And there's the big one at Yale. And those are the only ones that I know of that are really in public display.
David, go ahead and spin that one if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So again, I couldn't decide what side was kind of most interesting. So it's mounted on a spindle, if you will, so that I can turn it. And people don't believe that this is natural. I mean, people come over to my house, that's a sculpture. You know, it's a Henry Moore or Brancusi, but it is right out of the ground. And
you know, David, as you rotate that to the other side, I would say take a look at the way that the light falls on it and play with how the shadows fall across the specimen, because it creates kind of a different aspect to it as well.
Yeah. Well, the thing about these, and I see a lot of people at Yale sitting on a bench looking at that big concretion, because it's almost like a Rorschach test.
Yeah,
You can
exactly.
you can stare at it and you can see kind of whatever you
dead
want to
people
see in it. And this one to me looked like some kind of weird African totem or something. I mean, it
Yeah,
was just,
exactly.
and sometimes it looks friendly and sometimes it looks menacing. And
It's interesting to see if that would reflect anything that's going on in your business life when you see one or the other.
yeah, exactly. And then this is the largest Navajo pyrite that I've been able to find. And the top crystal up here, I got Daniel Ulibarri is now the owner of that mine.
Right. Yep.
And when he looked at this, he said, "Oh, that came from the level 2 mine, which has been closed for 30 or 40 years." And he said they found some of the best crystals there. And
I love it.
He loved this. And
I love that he could recognize what level. It's almost like Richard Graham's ability to know exactly which level any Bisbee piece came from.
yeah, no kidding, because, you could sort of say, well, pyrite is pyrite, but,
Right.
he looks at the little inclusions and the surfaces of the crystals. So he knew exactly where this came from. And to find it still on matrix was, just wonderful. And then, of course, I got all these little guys down here that I collected myself.
You collected those, right? Yeah. So you're still self-collecting.
I had a great time at that mine, and anybody who hasn't been to Navajo, should go, because it's just, first of all, it's a beautiful little town.
Looks that's like a neat elongated pyrite. I've never seen one like that. That's cool.
Yeah, Daniel gave that to me, but it's a very unusual, crystal form for the, Spanish pyrites.
Yeah. And Daniel's a great guy.
Back there.
He's going to be on our show eventually. Maybe we'll just fly out to Navajo and just do it live from the mine. That would be brilliant. Oh, that's what Raquel was talking about when she's talking about we need funding for our travels.
Yeah, there you go. I'll go with you, because
done.
I was enchanted by Navajo. Population 9. So it is.
Well, it's also in the Rioja region of Spain, which is famous for its wine. So yeah, we're gonna have a great time.
You will drink well. In Navajo. This is a very large geode from Morocco. And this is another one where you wish you were a spelunker about a half an inch tall.
Yep.
And you could just crawl inside and explore. And you can see there are all of these little caves in there that you can go into. And Stefan is curious about this piece because the stalactites, the quartz stalactites, first of all, they're very sparkly. So they're not like your usual calcite stalactites. They're very sparkly, and you can't see it on the camera probably, but they're full of little black dots of goethite. Mm-hmm. But they don't hang down straight. So they are all kind of curved, and you can see that on that one on the ceiling. And why the stalactites decided to go off sideways it's not an argument I want to get into, but I have a number of mineralogy head scratcher indeed. But it's a really exceptional geode. And
David, when you and I were looking at that the other day, I said it's very evocative of these underground caverns on the island of Mallorca in Spain that are partially flooded, and you can travel down into them, and they have some people who come out on boats and they're playing classical music. Now that we have Raquel on, I'm not sure if she's familiar with that, but it's an incredible experience. And, you look at a piece like that and it just brings up so much different imagery for different people.
Yeah, I want to do that on my next trip to Spain. That sounds great.
All right, we'll
So,
find that
and
for
of
you.
course, there's the lid, right? That's the piece that was taken off
Well, focus in on the lid because I think you can see
to
the
open up.
curving natures of the stalactites and
Yeah,
the Gertite inclusions a little bit easier.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's strange, you know. First of all, it's strange to see such sparkly quartz uh, in a geode like this, very crystallized. But secondly, all of these curved stalactites. Maybe the thing rolled or something while it was in formation. I don't know. And this is a huge. You've seen these plates of Colombian quartz that have started to come out,
Oh, yeah.
maybe 10 years ago. This one is really big, and I bought this off the back of a U-Haul truck in Tucson some years ago. And the interesting
You're
thing
going old
about,
style.
yeah, the interesting thing about these are, you get your typical quartz crystals that are like these big ones here, which are the primary growth, and they are symmetrical. They're
Okay.
hexagonal. But then you look at the secondary growth and they are bladed. So they still have six sides, but they're flat.
Huh.
And, they're not the usual, they're very thin. And what happens is at the end of the day, the sunlight streams in this window, hits this thing, and my room just fills with rainbows from these very prismatic quartz crystals that you see here
Now,
in this piece.
the people that are walking by on Com Ave, are they able to see any of these things from the street?
You can there's the street, so you can see a lot of this stuff from the street. And this is one of those Missouri, I believe it's Missouri calcites that showed up in Tucson some years ago. And
Massive.
this one was the only one that I just thought this one was very sculptural. It looks like a
Yeah.
lightning bolt
Oh,
hit it.
totally.
And
It's the
I
Zeus.
bought this from David Zegas. And yeah, my daughter Zoe has one that's more typical. It's sort of pineapple shaped and a very beautiful piece too. But this one just
I'm
struck
sorry,
me
Dave,
as
David. Was that David Ziga or James Zegras?
no David Ziga.
David Ziga. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And and then there's a Raquel seen this one. This is a 275-pound pyrite from the Andes in
Wow.
Peru. And the biggest crystal up there on top is 17 inches across. So, and you can't, it's very difficult to photograph this piece, but it is really sparkly. I mean, the surface is just, lustrous.
God,
Beyond
I can
belief.
imagine the reflections it shoots off in your office when the sun slants in.
Yeah, it's really nice. That's why I have those two pieces sitting in the window. And then
Watch
this
out,
is
Zoe's going to steal that one.
she's going to have to get a much stronger husband because this one is not going anywhere. If it ever falls off this stand, I think I'll collect it from the basement. And this is one of my newest piece, which is the only elmwood that I've ever seen that has this morganite color pink
That is superb.
in the middle. And it is really beautiful. And this is now sort of my favorite piece in the room.
Well, we're used
and
to seeing the golden, like the golden color throughout that you see on the right side termination there, but to have that morganite pink in there is fantastic.
yeah, it's really, I'm not quite sure why it's like this. I've never seen that color in any other elmwoods, and it's sitting on this just huge base of barite, white barite. So it is quite a spectacular piece. And again, this was one of the prized pieces in Richard Berger's collection. And
Well, David, I'm going to use a Wilburism there, a Wilburism here. That's so good, you want to slap your grandmother.
And right behind it, you can see this very tall, beautiful selenite crystal from Nika, from the Cave of Swords. And, it's about 4.5 feet tall and water clear. And I know when Stefan saw this, he said, that can't be Nika because the Nika selenites are all cloudy and stuff. But this came out a long time ago when people were still stealing stuff out of the Cave of Swords. And so I kind of like it. It's just, it's
Okay,
really
David, I've got a really important question to ask you about that piece. When you first got it and you put a flashlight under it to shine up the C-axis, did you use the Luke voice or the Darth Vader voice?
Yeah, no, it actually, that was my first instinct in lighting it. But because it's so transparent,
it doesn't make any difference. You can't see it.
It didn't really do anything. I mean, it lit the tippity top lit up, but the crystal itself didn't glow because there's nothing interfering with the light. So I've just kind of left it in the daylight. And here's another Nika piece, and this is about a 2.5 foot wide geode full of selenite crystals. And I was told that this came from the famous Nika mine, but at about the 300-foot depth level. And again, it's one of these things that you can just kind of peer in and kind of lose yourself in it because of all of
You took the words out of my mouth.
These wildly, crazed angles that these crystals are growing in. And of course, everybody's seen the Cave of Giant Crystals, which, that's the 30-foot crystals that are down at the 1,100-foot level. And Zoe and I were lucky enough to actually get in there as the so-called assistants to a scientist friend of ours.
How long were you able to be in before you had to be pulled out?
Less than 10 minutes because it is so hot in there that your body temperature goes up very quickly to the point where, it's dangerous. And so when you go in there with the other scientists, there's a medical person in there keeping an eye on you. And, as soon as you start to look like you're hallucinating, out you go. But
so you weren't able to ride your bike along the length of one of the crystals.
No, but it is something to see, and
I can imagine.
And then to see these crystals from the sort of 600-foot level, and then these smaller ones in this geode, I
love that they're next to each other, so that when you have visitors come see it, you can say they're actually from the same mine. I bet it kind of blows their mind.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you can see under as you get deeper into the earth and as the pressure and temperature changes, you get bigger and different crystals. So it's very cool. And then this is a big cluster of Himalayan quartz and beautiful, clear, water clear crystals. But I just loved the arrangement, the fact that you could get something this symmetrical out of the ground. And, the guy, Sammy,
Sammy Mackey from Matrix
Sammy
India.
Mackey. Yeah. He sent me a really cool video of these two guys carrying this thing down this treacherous mountain path on a sort of a stretcher. And, looking over the edge, it's like 800 feet down to the floor of the cliff. And like, whatever.
The story of extraction is almost more interesting than the piece itself.
Exactly. So I have some fun videos of that. And then this is I love this piece. This is one of the first big pieces I ever acquired. And this is a Brazilian smoky quartz. It's, I'm guessing 18 inches tall, maybe a little bigger, but it just has a beautiful color. And It's
That
one of
root
these
beer
things
color.
yeah, you get up close to it and you can just, you because it's water clear, you can just see all of the inclusions and just great. I mean, such a cool piece. My people come to my house love that piece.
Yeah, I could imagine.
And then we go back to you can see the living room in my house and my wife sitting on the couch. This is
This is superb.
this Vivianite really blew me away.
It's
Just
so
because
dynamic.
it's dynamic and it's symmetrical and I don't know what it looks like, some kind of natural fruit or something, that
Yeah.
um, when I saw this, uh, I couldn't resist it because it was unique, and just being such a great presentation. So I love that. And
That's
then
super.
this is a large Chinese quartz covered with hematite. And my wife
Now the
marked,
color of that is just it's fantastic.
yeah,
It's
I don't
super
know why.
saturated.
I mean, usually
Yeah.
these things are kind of dull,
Mhm.
but this one, Margaret calls it my sweet potato fries. And,
Oh, that's good. It's like a blooming onion.
yeah, it looks kind of like a blooming onion. And I don't know why this particular piece glows so well in the light because, most of these I have some other ones and put away that, are just brown.
Yeah, yeah.
And, this one you shine a light on it and all of a sudden, holy crap.
Lights
You know?
up. That's
Yeah.
superb.
Yeah.
You need to
Um,
put that on the top of your Christmas tree for your Christmas card this year.
yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, it would take the tree down. But
Bigger tree.
yeah. And let's see, we've got this one is just, still bite. And
Now that we got a really cool shot of your finger there, Dave.
oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
It's all right.
Um, I wear bow ties when I wear a
Oh,
bow
I
tie.
love that. I love that.
I think my daughter Zoe bought this for me because, whoops, did I lose the picture?
No, no, we still got you.
Oh, okay, there we go. I lost it. Um, so anyway, that's my bow tie piece, and then
Oh,
one of these celestite geodes from
yeah.
Morocco, and you can see I do these crazy things with these little LEDs. Like you can see that little LED sitting up there.
Yep.
That's lighting up the Indian piece.
Now you get those LEDs with different colors like you have at the museum?
Yeah, I just buy a variety of them off of eBay and fool around with them.
Right on.
And this is a big, this is kind of a decorator piece, right? This is just a big piece of calcite that they ripped out of some cave in China, and I've backlit it. But it's pretty cool. It's got
Super.
these big clusters of calcite crystals sticking out in every direction, and it's just a nice thing to look at.
Now, again, I'm looking at a wooden base, I think, there.
Yeah, this wooden base is not ornate like the other one. This is
But I mean, the nice thing is it raises it up and it allows you to put those other pieces down next to it. Whereas if it were flat, it would feel a lot more cluttered. So it kind of creates airiness for your display there.
It does, and that's a good point. And it's also they just do an amazing job fitting it to the contours of the bottom of these pieces.
I have to say that's another one where the wooden base, it goes well with it and it's not distracting like like some kind of scene from nature. It's just very very utilitarian, but still it adds to the piece. I think it enhances it a little.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the whole thing is beautiful, and I love to look at it. You can see it's right below my TV, and so when I'm watching a movie, I can watch that if whatever I'm watching gets boring. And then goofy oakenite balls in a geode. This falls into the category of sort of goofy piece.
No, that's a
And
scene from the. Isn't that from the Hoth scene where Luke Skywalker is hanging upside down?
yeah, it could be. And then a very nice kunzite with lepidolite.
Yeah,
I forget who I bought that from. And then up here, this is an epimorph, a
I
pretty
love
large
this.
epimorph from Morocco. And I was talking to Stefan about this the other day, and what was the cubic crystal that this formed around? And he has one at Yale also that's not it's not quite the same as this, but similar. And it's also got these cubic shapes. And he points out that there's no trace of the original mineral. It could have been salt, it could have been fluoride, it could have been calcite, could have been any number of minerals that the quartz formed around. Um, but whatever it is, it's gone and there's no trace of it. So, but this one has this depth to it, and I've put these little tiny LEDs inside so that you can really get right inside the thing and, get down inside. Zoe found this in one of the Moroccan tents
Right
in
on.
Tucson. She's got a good eye for seeing the one good thing in a pile of otherwise
Pile of stuff.
undistinguished stuff. Yeah, I'll be kind.
Exactly.
And
This to me was amazing because I've never seen malachite like that.
no, and Barry Ample had sort of put a hold on this at one of the dealers in Tucson up at the Westward Look, and he didn't come back to get it, and so the dealer sold it to me. And next thing I got a call from Barry, who was very annoyed, but every time we got together after that, he reminded me of the fact that I aced him out on this malachite piece. But Stefan thinks that these are not stalactites. This came off the bottom of a cave in the Congo, and they're hollow. I think if you can see if you get up close to them that they are hollow inside. And Stefan's theory is that there was gas bubbling up underneath as these malachite structures formed. So one of my
on the
favorite
backside,
pieces,
you notice any holes?
well, that's a good question. Well, it's hard to say. It's a sort of a porous. It's sort of a porous matrix. So who knows?
Okay. All right.
But yeah, very interesting piece.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen any others quite like it. And then another concretion. This was also one of my favorites. And this looked to me, reminded me, there's actually a Picasso painting from 1910, I believe, at the Fogg Gallery at Harvard of a mother and a child. And if you look at the concretion, it really looks like that, And so you can see in these things what you want to see, but everybody who comes to my house and sees this concretion immediately says, "Oh, that's a mother and child."
Absolutely. Well, I think you need to get that Picasso painting, hang it in your house in Spain, and then move that there, and so you'll kind of repatriate.
Yeah, it belongs back in Spain for sure.
Yep.
Okay, guys, I don't want to break up the fun, but we are 1 hour and 27 minutes in the show, and we should wrap it up soon. Thank you.
All right. Well,
I know we're having a lot of fun, so
we've got a cabinet full of cabinet-sized pieces. I love this skunk.
I love that. That's super
cool one. And then we've got some beautiful barite plates, amethyst cluster, the usual Indonesian, the crocoite from the 2010 pocket. And then over here, a beautiful wolfenite that, and the vanadinite from Morocco, and just another great little calcite and fluorite from the Elmwood mine, and that
I love that.
calcite
So
crystal
that calcite so perfectly perched.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't look natural, and that's one of my favorite little pieces. And then there's this little Christmas tree of pentagonite from India that it just almost looks like it's not natural. And then a beautiful scolecite from India. And I have a great. This is the last piece we'll look at. I have a great movie of Sammy pulling this out. They were doing road work near Delhi, and they hit a pocket. They called Sammy. Sammy comes with his crew. They take these things out over a period of a day or two. Some money changes hands, and then the road work resumes. And that's kind of typical of those Indian zeolites.
Yeah.
So there's more, but you get the idea.
Superb. I mean, what a great environment to be in your home office. And I totally understand where all of a sudden you turn around and you're surrounded by beauty. So congratulations. And thank you so much for taking us through that brief, maybe not so brief, walk of your collection. I'm looking at some of the comments and I know that the people are going crazy. They're loving it. All right, David, I'm going to try to move us along here. We are in the Quick Fire 5 segment of the show. We're going to do this, and then we're going to go to do some Q&As, see how many questions people have. Hopefully, we're not going to go too much longer. But the way this works is I have 5 questions. Every question has 2 answers. You tell me which answer you resonate with most strongly. All of your answers are correct. The viewers have tried to predict how you're going to answer, and we're going to see how well the viewers do. So are you ready?
David, can you turn your camera back? Perfect. Thank you.
There we go. Oh, look at that smiling face. Okay, David, question number 1. Favorite hobby, biking or kayaking?
Oh, well, I have a racing show down at the Cape, and it's great exercise. And so, I do that during the summer. I bike most of the rest of the year. I've got minerals, but I'm also, very involved in music and philanthropic things around Boston. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a spare minute.
Okay.
The key is don't waste time commuting and don't watch TV. And if you do that, it's amazing how much time you have.
Indeed. So of the 2 hobbies, the biking or the kayaking, which is your favorite?
Oh, boy, I don't know. I love biking. So you can get out and see the countryside.
Okay.
And I'll bring my bike to Tucson. So.
Okay. Question number 2. This is a really tough one. Favorite holiday destination, Spain or Cape Cod?
Well, Cape Cod is not really a holiday. I just I relocate, or as they say in Spain, trasladar. And so I think if I were to pick a destination for holiday, it would definitely be Spain and maybe Granada.
Yeah, Granada. Yeah. Your favorite musical instrument, and I'm sorry we didn't get to this because I'm fascinated by this too, that you're a composer. Favorite musical instrument, synthesizer or guitar?
Well, I started synthesizer company, so I'd have to say synthesizer. And
synthesizer.
Yeah.
Favorite dessert, again, tough choice, chocolate or chocolate cake?
Anything with chocolate is kind of on, as long as it's good and as long as it tastes like chocolate, I'm good with it.
But which of the 2 would you prefer? Which of the 2 ranks higher in your perspective or in your life?
Well, if it's a really good chocolate cake, then you've got the art mixed with the chocolate.
Doesn't get better. Favorite meal, I don't care as long as it's Spanish, or I don't care as long as I can share.
I like meals that you can share. So I like tapas and, or pinchos, as they say in northern Spain.
In northern Spain,
and And I like the Mediterranean diet. I like the Mediterranean food. I like fish. I like the fresh vegetables and fruits. And so, yeah.
Superb. So as long as you can
Spain,
share
Spain
it,
and
better
Italy.
if it's Spanish, but if you can share it, it wins out. Okay, Raquel or Eloise, who is doing the answers here? It looks like Eloise.
I'm on top of it, I guess.
Okay. Question number 1, favorite hobby, biking or kayaking? David went predictably with biking. And there were a lot of context clues in the interview. So anyone who got this wrong, you weren't paying attention. What did our viewers say, Hello?
So they were paying attention. We got mostly biking. Yes.
Biking, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2, favorite holiday destination, Spain or Cape Cod?
Spain. Yes.
Spain.
We got it right.
Ding, ding, ding. Favorite musical instrument, synthesizer or guitar? David
It
went
was a
with
tough one. We got guitar here.
Guitar.
Yeah.
Okay. Understandable. Favorite dessert, chocolate cake. After deliberation, David ultimately went with chocolate cake. What did our viewers say?
52% for chocolate. So it was almost a tie.
Well, but you can use that to make a chocolate cake.
Yeah, true. Okay, this is the tiebreaker. We got 2 correct, 2 wrong answers. Favorite meal, I don't care as long as it's Spanish, or I don't care as long as I can share. David went with the share answer. What did our viewers say?
Spanish.
Oh, unfortunately, if you guys got it correct, then all of you were welcome to visit David at home and look into his collection in person. I'm just making that up. But okay, now you know. Let's go to the Q&A. Do we have any Q&As that David can answer in the few minutes we have left in this program?
We had so many questions. Most of them were related to what they were seeing at the time, so it was really hard and didn't want to interrupt. For the last one, for example, with the malachite, with the holotubes, where that was coming from, for example? I guess it's from the Congo.
That was Congo.
So another question, but belated happy birthday to Brian, as we missed it. Brian, happy birthday again.
Thank you very much. And I had a beautiful birthday dinner with Raquel and Eloise in Munich. So thank you, ladies, for buying me dinner.
Question from John. Are there still minerals on display on the ground floor of the Klein Geology Lab next door at the museum? And do visitors have access to it?
Yeah, there are, and there's more going out. Those are minerals that were at the Peabody before I started my project. So those are the, some of the older specimens from the Peabody collection. And I think you can walk in.
Okay, that's good to know.
And the museum itself is free of charge now too. We raised enough money to subsidize admission.
That's even better. Thanks for making that point. Sabina had a question. Do you personally have a best museum display list that she can go and visit?
Well, there are lots. I mean, Raquel's museum is beautiful, and they have a fantastic collection. The Smithsonian, of course, the Perot in Dallas, has a beautiful collection from local collectors down there, the Spans and others. So those are just a few that I really like.
Okay, well, thanks. So that was the questions I had in the Q&A. A bunch of questions in the that were not put in the Q&A, but again, thanks, Barbara, to mentioning of course, the Paris School of Mines Museum. Love you, Barb. So I think we're almost out of time. If I may just have a quick question. What about the museum and the collection behind the scenes? What kind of collections do they have? Is it accessible for researchers? Because I guess that the museum is still a research facility, or isn't it?
Yeah, it's very much like Harvard's museum. So, there's a staff of mineral professionals, and they have, an extensive collection that's not on display, but it's down in the basement and out on the West Campus. And there are always requests coming in from scientists and scholars who, want to examine things. And just like Harvard, they're constantly servicing requests from mineralogists and crystallographers and whatnot all around the world. Probably much like your museum too, Eloise.
Yeah. Yes, that's a live museum collection, I guess. People had questions regarding lights as well, but I guess you answered that you mostly buy them from eBay, but no specific brand. Is that it? The
My
ones that you
lights here?
use, like the little lights that go inside the geodes, for example.
Well, you got to watch for color, for the CRI, the color rendering index. And I try to buy things that are at least 90 CRI, because otherwise you'll get some weirdness with the color. And so they're expensive, but they make a big difference in the color rendering. And you can get 2,700 Kelvin, 3,000 Kelvin, 4,000 Kelvin, 5,000 Kelvin, 6,000 Kelvin, and you just have to experiment with what combinations work best with what minerals.
Okay, well, thanks, David, for taking this time for us. It's wonderful. I had many comments saying, the show made it possible for a lot of people from around the world to actually see your collections, because, obviously it's not accessible to everyone. So thanks a lot for sharing that with everyone today, but also in the future when the video is going to be on display on YouTube. So thanks a lot, David.
My pleasure. It was great fun.
Thank you, David. Good to see you.
Okay. Gracias.
De nada, a ti.
David, thank you again for spending so much of your morning with us here on Mineral Talks Live and with all of our viewers online. Really appreciate it. I had an absolutely fantastic time. Look forward to seeing you again in the future. For those of you watching, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tune in again, December 4th, I believe it is. That is our next Mineral Talks live show and the final Mineral Talks live show for 2024. So we will see you in a month. Until then, live with aloha. Take care.